The morning Timothy Caldwell was born, the snow outside their modest Kentucky cabin glowed like silver in the soft winter sun. His mother, Evelyn, had labored through the night, her pain muffled by the howling wind and her husband's trembling prayers. When the midwife wrapped the newborn in a worn woolen shawl and handed him to Evelyn, there was a hush in the room, an odd stillness, as if the world itself had stopped to witness this child's arrival. Timothy did not cry. He blinked at the world with unflinching eyes, wide and glassy blue, and he made no sound. Not a gurgle. Not a sob. "He's quiet," the midwife said carefully, uncertain. Evelyn, pale and exhausted, smiled faintly. "He's just taking his time. Some folks do." But days turned into weeks, and the boy still didn't make a sound. No crying, no cooing, no babble. His chest rose and fell with a calmness that bordered on eerie. And though he stared into faces with an intensity that unsettled even the town's preacher, he never smiled. Doctors were called, one from as far as Cincinnati, but they all left scratching their heads. He wasn't deaf. He wasn't mute. He responded to sound, turned his head when someone entered the room, and even gripped fingers with surprising strength. But he simply wouldn't speak, or even attempt to. By the time he was 4, it was clear, Timothy Caldwell was unlike any child medicine had seen, or science could explain. People began to talk, as they do. "Touched by an angel," said some. "Cursed by a ghost," whispered others. Evelyn ignored them. She taught him how to point at what he needed, to write simple words in charcoal on scraps of wood, and to listen. He listened better than anyone. Whether it was a robin's chirp, the creak of a chair, or the soft rattle in her chest when she had trouble breathing, Timothy noticed everything. She would often look up from her sewing and find him watching her, not with worry or confusion, but with deep, unwavering attention. As if memorizing the very fabric of her soul. His father, Abel Caldwell, was a farmer of few words himself, but even he struggled with the silence of his boy. "A man ought to speak," he'd say, half to Evelyn, half to himself. "Ought to yell or laugh or curse, least." Timothy never did. But he was always there, fixing what was broken, feeding animals that limped or starved, placing a blanket over his mother's shoulders before the wind howled through the gaps in the log walls. No one taught him these things. He simply knew. When Evelyn passed away the winter Timothy turned 10, no one could understand how he didn't fall to pieces. He knelt by her bedside, holding her hand long after it had grown cold. He didn't cry. He didn't run. He just sat, staring at her, and then, just before the sun rose, he stood, kissed her forehead, and covered her with the quilt she had made when he was born. He did not eat for 3 days. Then he returned to the fields. And still, he didn't speak. At 15, Timothy was tall and strong with deep-set eyes that saw what others missed. He could mend a broken wool faster than a blacksmith and calm a spooked horse with a single look. Farmers came to him with livestock that wouldn't feed, and sick babies that wouldn't sleep. Somehow, he always knew what to do. People stopped calling him strange. They started calling him gifted. Dr. Hiram Willoughby, a Harvard-educated physician traveling through from Boston, visited after hearing of the mute boy who healed sick animals. He examined Timothy thoroughly. The boy cooperated, calm as ever, answering questions with nods or chalk marks on slate. When the doctor asked, "Why don't you speak?" Timothy simply wrote, "Words are too small." Dr. Willoughby stared at the slate. "Too small for what?" Timothy looked him in the eyes for a long time, then pointed to his own chest. His heart. But hearts can break too. One spring evening, the town flooded. Rain fell for 3 days straight, and the river that snaked behind the village rose with a hunger no one could stop. It washed away fences, wagons, chickens, and hope. Timothy was seen hauling an old woman on his back through chest-deep water. Then he pulled 2 children from a sinking barn. Then a horse. But when the final house gave way to the current, the townspeople could only scream as a baby's wail echoed from inside. No one moved. Except Timothy. He ran. Leapt into the current without pause. He disappeared beneath the frothing, muddy water. Minutes passed. Then an hour. People cried out. Prayed. Some turned away, unable to watch. Then, like a ghost rising from the grave, Timothy emerged, soaked, shivering, holding the baby high above his head with two trembling hands. He collapsed on the riverbank, baby still safe in his arms. And as the mother ran to him, tears streaming down her face, Timothy looked up at her with those unblinking eyes. Then, for the first time in his life, he spoke. One word. Alive. The baby survived. But Timothy fell ill. His lungs, filled with river water and grit, grew weaker each day. Dr. Willoughby, summoned again, tried everything he could. He saved them all, the doctor muttered, pacing the candlelit room. But I fear we can't save him. As the fever burned, people came to sit by his bedside. The woman whose baby he had saved held his hand and whispered stories. Children brought drawings. Men who once called him strange sat with heads bowed in silence. Abel Caldwell, now gray and hunched, sat quietly beside his boy. You didn't need to speak to teach us, he said, his voice rough as sand. You just needed to be. But the strangest thing happened. Timothy didn't die. He lay on that bed for 7 days. And then, just when the last candle had burned out, and the last prayer had been said, he opened his eyes. And he smiled. Wide. Bright. As if light had cracked through the seams of the world. He rose slowly, walked out onto the porch where the town had gathered, and stood barefoot in the morning dew. He looked out at the people. Then he raised his voice, clear, steady, and warm. And he spoke. I know why I'm here. Over the next few years, Timothy spoke more often, though sparingly. His words were always precise, poetic even, as if each sentence cost him something precious. He became a healer, a mentor, a quiet prophet of sorts. People came from states away to see the boy who had once been silent. They didn't come to be cured. They came to be changed. Years later, when Timothy Caldwell passed away peacefully at the age of 61, the town bell rang 61 times. People carved his favorite phrase into the stone above his grave, words are too small, but love isn't.